Awesome. We'll start this September 5th meeting of the Next Generation Advisory Board. I will call our meeting to order. Open it up for public comment, but there's no members from the public here. So we'll move along to our discussion topics. And our first one is having the city manager, Jim Becklenberg, share with us about the 2025 budget.
Yeah.
Time. Right on time.
Just about to start.
Sorry.
We should introduce you. Yeah, I was gonna introduce me and say good evening. It's nice to be here. I'm excited to be with this committee. My name is Jim Becklenberg. I'm the city manager for Littleton. Do you guys know what the city manager is? I can do the thumbnail quickly. Andrew does, yeah. So we have a council manager form of government in Littleton. And that means that unlike a city like Denver or a lot of larger communities that are kind of commonly referred to as strong mayor cities, in Littleton, the city council and the mayor work together as one city council to make the big policy decisions for the community, set direction on where we're going, what our budget is, all those kinds of things. But most city council members, they are part-time positions, and our city council members all have full-time jobs or have full lives outside of their council responsibilities. So under the council manager form of government, the city council collectively hires a city manager to kind of act as the CEO for the city. So if you figure the city council is the board of directors hired by the people who vote and live here, the city manager is the CEO who is responsible for management of the organization, being responsive to the city council and hearing their interests for where the community should go. And then working with all the other smart people who work for the city to bring recommendations to the council on how to get where they want to go. And then once hearing direction, after the council's made a decision, it's the city manager's job again to work with all of our staff to implement where the direction the council wants to go. So that's what I do. I get to work with all of our departments, and I think putting together the budget to recommend to the city council is a main part of my job. But thankfully, we have smart finance people who do a lot of the guts of the work, and it's my job to help facilitate a lot of the council interest and the staff involvement and really communicate to the council what the staff needs through the budget process to accomplish where they want to go. So with that, I can jump in. This is a perfect night for this presentation, because this is literally hot off the press. This budget is what we call the proposed budget right now. And the city council has its annual budget workshop scheduled for Saturday. And every year, as you'll see, the staff starts on the budget kind of formally in about May of the year. We're always working on budget, checking revenues, monitoring expenses, kind of developing priorities. But the budget process starts in May. We're at the point now where the city council will have its formal discussion of the proposed budget on Saturday, and that's planned to be kind of an all-day affair. I believe Andrew came last year.
Yeah, I've come in the past. Yeah.
So it's a whole lot of fun. I say facetious. The council does kind of get into it, and it's about, understanding where we are financially, and then how much of what they want to accomplish can be accomplished in the upcoming year. I'll say off the bat that in my experience and where I come from for budget, The next year's budget is really only the first year of, say, a 5-year plan, a 5-year forecast. So it's very important because we appropriate money and we, set our revenue estimates. But we, and I think the council would say, we want to view the budget as a long-term plan. We don't view it as just the next year. So you'll see, I work very closely with our 5-year forecast. That's really where it starts and ends for me. That shows us kind of what we're looking at for next year, but then how kind of the longer term implications of our budget and the revenues that, best estimates that we have. So with that, this is about, as I said to Robert, 30% of what the council will be seeing. This is really my attempt to brief you and share a little bit of how we do budget and what I think is important for a city as we look at it. So I'd like to start big picture. First of all, the detailed proposed budget is online. If you look to this meeting that we have Saturday, the 600 or so pages of budget and our capital plan are online for the public and for the council to look at. The purpose here and what we do with the presentation is try to focus. My philosophy is always make sure the council and the public have all the detail, but then it's our job to help them focus on what the main policy issues are and what the main kind of narrative arc, I would say, is for the next year and for the budget over that 5-year period. So let's start with budget goals. First, this year, as you'll hear, our focus is really on implementing the council's priorities as expressed through our strategic plan. And we're also, it's important to say up front, while we're not going to be adding much this year for reasons that you'll hear, we are going to be able to avoid, with this budget, we'll be able to avoid reduction of any of our service levels. Also, you'll see a focus, the council will see a focus on trying to retain and develop the staff that we have. We have a lot of new leadership and a lot of staff who've been here a while, but we're very competitive in our region for top quality staff. And probably our main emphasis on the expenditure side of this budget is to retain the people we have, make sure that we can stay competitive, and at the same time, really put some stronger professional development and leadership development into place as we go forward next year. We also have our first 5-year capital improvement plan. Littleton for many years has operated with really just the next year capital plan. What streets are we going to fix? What projects are we going to do in this next year? I was a little surprised when I got here and saw that, but I've been here for a couple of years. But it makes sense when you see that we really had very little revenue. Littleton has a history of long lists of deferred maintenance backlogs. But thankfully, in 2022, our voters approved a new 3/4 cent sales tax. You may have heard of Measure A that is generating really important revenue for us, probably upwards of $12 million a year now, that we can use directly for projects and also leverage grants at the state and federal level to get a lot of the big work and a lot of the smaller work done. That's really important for reinvesting in our infrastructure. So one of our themes citywide has been this ramp up in our capital improvement program and all of the people and the infrastructure around that to go from, a few $1,000,000 a year of investment to now, $20, $40, or $50 million a year, depending on the year of capital program, which is really an incredible scaling there. And then it's also important to mention, we think it's important that the city has responsible reserve levels in all of our funds.
fund is a technical term. It's like funds are like different checking accounts where you can only spend money in one fund for things that are allowed by that fund. Or the general fund, you can spend money on everything.
Yeah.
But so that word funds is a technical term in that case.
Yeah, and I can speak to some of the non-general funds, but this presentation's really focused on our general fund. And as Robert said, that's where the city council has some discretion to work and where they can, that's where probably 90% of our services are funded out of the general fund. Our general fund revenues can be used for any government purpose. So that's why we're focusing on this here. Couple of assumptions as we head in. As you'll hear, we are looking at some uncertain economic times with our sales tax. And that's causing us to recommend that despite that uncertainty looks like, we do want to hold our service levels and not reduce our services at this point like we might otherwise think of, because we know we're fairly certain we're going to have some new revenue coming next year. So we are going to be unusually recommending some use of our fund balance, small share of that to balance next year's budget, in case our sales tax revenues don't return as we hope they do. We'll also be managing expenditures with savings as much as we can with some vacancy savings that we think will happen.
Question for you, Jim.
Yeah.
You said that there's concern about like the sales tax revenue. Is that because of like the county's proposed ballot measure, or is that something?
No, it's really economy.
Okay.
We have a couple slides to talk about that, but Littleton has seen 3 to 4% increases in sales tax now for several years. And, we're not alone. The region here has seen kind of a flattening of sales tax this year. There's some thought that the effects of the spending effects, the consumer effects of COVID are starting to finally wear off. And so that's a factor. There's also just a lot of economic uncertainty right now where there's some, I think, caution among consumers. So important when I talk to the council, tell them that there are some things that are not in the budget, future development happening, especially along the Mineral Avenue corridor project we call the Lumen project, also the Evergreen and Toll Brothers projects, which are at the corner of Santa Fe and Mineral, that will be coming online. It's our practice that we don't include anticipated sales tax revenues in our budget before those projects are permitted and they're just about ground broken. You really don't want to build your services based on anticipated revenues and have them not come. So some people at this point will say, come on, those places are coming, but we're saying, no, we're going to hold off a little longer.
Don't count your chickens before they hatch.
Exactly. The council has also placed a ballot measure on the ballot for November that would increase the city's sales tax on recreational marijuana by an additional 4%, and that would keep us competitive with the other communities around us for sales tax. We're currently on the very kind of low end there. This would bring us to the middle to high end of the scale for sales tax. If it passes, we think that'll bring probably $450,000 or so. It would help actually secure we call them proactive police services, particularly working with our unhoused community, some of the behavioral health staff that we've brought on, and some of those services. This revenue would help to cement that. I also mentioned the city council's strategic plan. advancing those. And then an important point, we have no new staff in our general fund, which is not unheard of. But as our services become more complex, as we see growth in certain areas, it's important that we keep up. And given those economic circumstances I mentioned, we're not able to do that for this year. So it's not an easy message for our staff, but it's an important one that, in a year where we're expecting that our revenues might not quite cover our costs, it's just not the year to add new stuff. So, real quickly, these are our strategic outcomes. These are outcomes that were set by the council and based on the Envision Littleton Community Plan from a couple years ago. And these are really the long range 20 to 30 year vision points for what we need to deliver on long term to reach our vision for Littleton. So we're saying we need to be a vibrant community with rich culture, a sustainable community with natural beauty. We need to have a robust and resilient economy. Need to be a safe community. We need to have high quality governance. So in the full presentation, we have about 20 slides that will walk the council through the specific deliverables. It's important that we as staff reflect back to the council. We told you these were the things we would get done next year. We want to make sure, we want to come back to you and reiterate that those are funded in this year's budget. So we'll spend some time on that. So if these are the outcomes, the council has then said, okay, what are the big things we got to get done over the next few years in order to make meaningful progress toward those outcomes? When the council met in February, they identified about 30 things that they think we should get done over the next two to 3 years. And we call those strategic initiatives. So those are kind of those big things that the council tells staff, you got to get these big things done. And we'll be able to be accountable for those. We need to have kind of ongoing communication about them. The budget workshop is one time of the year where we do that. So that's why we'll have about 20 slides to have that dialogue with the council about those initiatives. Excited about that?
I am. Remember, I gotta go to Green Day.
Yeah,
End of the day.
that's right.
I'll do a Green Day.
Yeah, I'm going to Green Day, so it can't go long.
Good. Keep saying that. So, these are too small to read on the screen, but these are where you'll see those things that you're probably aware of, like under vibrant community with rich culture. Number 1 is the downtown mobility and streetscape plan, arts and culture master plan, implement our diversity, equity, and inclusion plans, a cultural campus around the library and museum, and the arts and culture master plan. So I'm not going to read through all of these, but if you think of that level of project and the things that are coming, you'll see similar things under safe community, under sustainable community, high quality government is kind of where we focus on a lot of the governance work that we're doing. And then the other one, just covered here, back. So I want to mention for a second, it's also an important concept that we have those outcomes and these initiatives, which council's real focused on. We like to use this analogy of the iceberg for where these initiatives fit in terms of all the things we do. We also like to remind council, yeah, we know these are the big things, but you see the iceberg beneath the water, that's all the stuff we do the rest of the time to keep the trains running. So expression, just that, the things like street maintenance and snow plowing and paying the bills and development review and all of that work is the vast bulk of the work that the city does and that the budget funds and that our departments have gone through and done work plans around, that align with those outcomes and with these initiatives. And so we like to keep that in mind, that we're focusing during the budget, this presentation on those initiatives, but the budget is really funding the whole iceberg. Right, Robert?
Yes, in my budgeting class, we call it, we do incremental budgeting. And so what we really focus is in just the change at the margin, and the majority of the work stays the same within the organization.
Yep. So now we'll jump in for just a minute. Where does the city's money come from? 79%, rounded up to 80% of the city's money comes from sales tax. That's a high percentage for cities. I've worked for a number of cities, and most cities are more balanced in terms of sales tax and property tax. So that's good news when the economy is strong, because sales tax is, can really come in strong when the economy softens like it is now, even a little bit. The loss of a couple $1 million or a couple percentage points of sales tax can have some real consequence for us. As you see, our property taxes are 4%. We have very low property taxes. We have 2 mills. So 2 mills is ballpark 2% of the property tax paid on a house goes to the city. And I always like to make the point, don't let me get in too far in the weeds because I can't on this stuff, but what that comes down to when you take a house that's say $600,000 and you hear about how much people are paying for property taxes, because it's a lot when you total it all up. It really, your city, what comes to the city is about, I think, $12 a month. So when you think of that, and you think of the services covered by the city, and you think of police and all the public works and all of the development services and all the code compliance, all that work, it's largely driven by sales tax. But if you think of what that resident pays, and so many residents think that their property tax pays for city services, it really doesn't. And so we have a small share of the property tax. We used to have more. We used to have a fire department, and about 5 years ago, the city merged its fire department with South Metro Fire and Rescue. And as part of that agreement, the city effectively had to give most of its property tax to South Metro Fire and Rescue. So that's why that is that way. So again, here's where our general fund will come in at about $59.3 million this year, which is about 2.7 million or 2.7% more than we had than we're estimating now for this year. And you can see that most of that is still in sales tax, even though it's coming in at a lower increase rate than we thought it might. Really the point there when you look at where all the money's coming from. Stop me if you have questions. So again, might be more important, more interesting for Saturday, but I wanted to just show you, this is what's happened to sales tax since 2015. We had kind of modest growth, 5% or so over that time. And then, COVID happened, 2020 and 21. And then sales tax, as a lot of the economic incentives subsidies from the federal government started happening, we saw some real sales tax benefit. And we saw terrific sales tax growth through 2022. Then 2023 started to slow down a little bit. 2024, last year, we really saw it start to fall off. In about the second half of the year, it was flat. And that was a little surprising. And we really we're cautious with some estimates for this year. But this year, it's also flat. we're thinking for the whole year. So as you look at the 24, those blue and the red and the orange lines, it's just showing if we kept our growth that we had projected for the future from last year's budget, we'd be seeing that growth. But now we're looking at probably half, we had probably 4% plugged in for last year, estimated in the budget. I believe we're at 2 or 2.5 for now for next year. And we're cautious as we go out. You see that just changes our revenue base going forward.
Does the city plans, like, I imagine there's like projects and things projected with the expected funds. Is there like other grants or things they're gonna use to try and close that gap? Or is it just kind of affecting projects further out schedule wise?
Great question. It means that, you know, for next year, we're not enhancing services. We're not able to make any more headway toward where, you know, all of our departments and where council would like to go in terms of some new services. And, you know, we're trying our best, and that's why the focus needs to be on, you know, probably our biggest cost is our people. And so, you know, salaries and benefits are probably 60% or pushing 65 of our costs, and benefits are going up even faster than salaries in the area. So we're really trying to keep up with that as a priority in these times. But if, you know, revenues don't come back and if we don't see the development, we're going to be in a budget reduction mode over the next couple of years, because unlike the federal government, we can't print money and we have to live within our means. We're going to keep appropriate reserves because, you know, we've all seen severe recessions, and we know how sales tax can drop. And if we were to lose one of our big retailers, for instance, it's not just the next year that impacts. It's really, you know, how do you want to have a few years of reserves so that you can slowly transition your service levels down to your new service level. So, you know, we always want to avoid laying off staff. That's the last thing you want to do, or slamming the brakes on services. That's really disruptive to the community and the organization. So getting ahead, but it's important to have, you know, strong reserves so that you can manage some of the volatility.
Just to, if you want to hold on that for a second, you asked about grants versus deferring projects. You see the gap between those two lines is a couple $1 million. And while some of that we could make up with grants or other funding sources, there are very few kinds of grants that could make up that gap in one fell swoop. So realistically, what it looks like adjusting project timelines and schedules.
Yeah. So again, just a total revenue trend. You can see how 24, 25, and 26 get relatively flat. We base our future revenue projections on more of our historical averages. So you can see how we are projecting in the out years, we call it, of the forecast to be a little stronger than the next couple of years. But of course, we have time to adjust in the out years. That's why the forecast is so important as we see what actually happens. So general fund strategies, we've talked about this. I won't belabor this again, but just that alignment with council's priorities, development and retention of our employees. We do have some significant software with full costs coming online next year. And then we also do think that it's appropriate to use some of our fund balance, which is a one-time source. If it's not spent 1 year, it kind of becomes part of the savings. That is some money you can use for some of the one-time things you need to get done. Increase in our employee costs, 1.6 million for next year. That includes the increases consistent with what we're knowing from other communities. Again, that's probably a 3 to 4% increase that's based on evaluations and some other work that we have to do. But that's what's in the budget. It's kind of a pool for increases, healthcare. I do want to point out to council and to you that, you know, we're taking a recent DEI assessment very seriously. And one of the big themes that came through from that is just the need for us to formalize our leadership culture and our culture more broadly, a lot of our systems. And the first place to do that, I think, is with some leadership, you know, training, investment. We have a lot of smart folks coming up into supervisory roles, some new department heads, and it's time to kind of formalize what our culture is there. And so there's a project in here to help us initiate that sort of program. You may have heard of our Workday ERP project. We're excited about that major investment, bringing us into the 21st century for human resources and finance software. Chris is very familiar and doing a great job helping transition our systems in finance. But the full bill comes due this year, and we knew that, and we had planned for it, but it's about $400,000 more than it was in this current year. So that's the first of the full annual cost for Workday. And then we also have some other software that we think is important to continue with, helps us with efficiencies, which we are, you know, we're always looking for where we can use technology more for efficiencies. So we think those are worth going ahead with. Some of the one-time stuff that we call it, again, you'll see in our forecast, we keep a strong eye on our kind of ongoing cash flow. We want to make sure that our ongoing revenues can cover our ongoing costs. We have a number of one-time things, given the healthy level of fund balance that we have, again, kind of like savings in your checking account. If that gets to where you feel it's kind of healthy, you can start to do some of those things you need to move forward on. One of the things council has directed is a major study of our Littleton Boulevard corridor, looking at everything from historic preservation, how do we keep that mid-century modern architecture while also embracing new investment like the Cherry Cricket, like Littleton Brewing Company, not Dirt Coffee, but it's coffee place. Lost. That's a great place, and Lost is a great example of what we're trying to foster more of. So how do we do that? Looking at transportation needs now. How do we make it safer for walkers and bikers? How do we connect it with the rest of that? How do we make sure zoning and other land use interests can connect Littleton Boulevard with Powers in the neighborhood to the north and neighborhood to the south? How do we make sure we're doing parking? That, an offshoot of our success with some of that is that neighborhoods are feeling some of that parking challenges. So we're recommending that we pay for that out of our fund balance, $1.2 million. You also just see some the ongoing planning for our Geneva Village redevelopment, along with kind of a broader look at this whole city center site. I won't speak to all of these. I don't know if you have any questions, but we do have some placeholder money. We're excited. We have an environmental sustainability coordinator starting this month. We know we need some placeholder funding for that work. ADA compliance, have more of that work we're doing. DEI, that's the strategy implementation that I think could be the leadership work, along with a few more things. Arts and culture, economic impact study, and then we haven't actually had funding in our budget for Main Street holiday lights. So we said,
what about the planners, man? What about the planners?
Except we are trying to transition a lot of that lighting and a lot of that work to the Downtown Development Authority, if you're familiar with that. We also like to highlight, we want the council to see what are some of the things that are not in this budget? It's important to me as city manager that we acknowledge those needs, things that, you know, our department heads have said, hey, we need more of this, but, you know, are not, you know, ultimately I have to make decisions about what is, what's recommended to be included in this budget. I mentioned how this year, given how we're going into it with kind of a deficit projection, you know, I'm not recommending more employees, new employees. Doesn't mean that we don't have the needs. So I wanted to make sure the council hears what some of those are. And you'll see here, development review improvements. We really have we've got a lot of planning and process work that's been done. We need a little resource to help move that forward. New laws around digital accessibility, website accessibility. The right thing to do goes under the category of right thing to do, but not easy to get it done. When you think of all of the documents, all of that we put on the website, it's gonna take, we're gonna use some consulting money for next year as we kind of start to figure out what the new laws are gonna actually require. But we also know we're gonna need probably a staff person ultimately to help with that traffic and help us to get smarter as an organization when it comes to digital access. Finance, accounting capacity. We need additional ongoing dedicated staff there. Authority, facilities, so much facilities project work happening. We have exciting, and I think I'll give some kudos to Dennis. Our library staff's doing a really good job of looking at what's the highest and best use. We have lots of capacity. We have lots of capacity needs. Demand for our services is jumping through the roof. What can we do you know, smarter if we just did things a little bit differently? How do we use our current staff better? And there's some really good ideas there that we're not able to jump on this year. I mentioned organizational development. Well, I didn't mention the need, but as we look at this DEI work and we look at this culture of belonging we're trying to create, we know that if we're gonna really take it seriously and move these initiatives, a lot of these new systems forward, we're gonna need some resource to do that because we're really not staffed for someone to lead that now. And then finally, this year, the last 2 years, we've been fortunate to have a city manager's office management fellow, younger professional who's getting some experience and adding a whole lot of good work. So wait for the council member to tuck his head back in, but this is also a picture of coming attractions for next year's budget. When we talk about new revenues, a lot of these things will be coming back for next year's budget.
I don't see lake.
You don't see it. So we also have really a lot of success with our downtown businesses and really businesses all over with some revitalization grants. We're helping business. We're able to match businesses' investments in improving their store facades for instance. We started a program this year. Money was applied for and gone by June. So there's a lot of great multiplying potential with those grants that we want to do. This isn't the year to add those. Again, good thinking in the library. Going to be doing some strategic planning. And that is one thing that I think we're able to shift around some timing on. Is that what we're doing?
Timing or possibly alternate funding.
Alternate funding, yeah, to get that work done. So I gotta speed up. So I get into budget. I'm into this stuff. So here's where we spend our money.
It's good that you're excited about your.
It goes to police and public works and library museum. You know, I always like to make the point, this pie chart isn't quite, I think we can work on it further, but when you when you combine all the public works related stuff, some of our general operations have some other public works. We, like many cities, spend about 2/3 of our general fund on the very basic services of law enforcement and public safety. So, comes down to that. I'll say we're very fortunate, not many cities our size can spend the money we do on a first-rate library and a museum. So, I always like to make sure folks see that because it's an important investment that we're making. Not a small one, but an important one.
So you said first-rate library and a second-rate museum? Is that what you said?
That is what I said. That's what Dennis can tell, yeah. That's what Dennis can take back.
That is recorded.
And on the left, you can see that we're almost 70% of our budget on people. So again, not gonna spend a lot of time on these. You've already seen these numbers. Thing I want to point out that's news on this slide is that we're starting the budget with about $22.9 million in fund balance, or it's for us, pretty much the same thing as our reserves. That starting number is about 40% of our planned expenditures. As we work through, if we need to use some of that fund balance, we're projecting it could be a little more than $1 million. And we do those one-time expenditures, that fund balance at the end of the year could be 19.7 million, just under 20%, 20 million for, 34%. So this is probably more important when you look at the future and why it's important that we have reserves, which is right here. This is our 5-year forecast model rounded to the hundreds of thousands. I focus on that yellow line, net cash flow. This is an ugly net cash flow line because you see those negative numbers. Our finance team, I think our department heads, council members who may have been on for a couple of years know that it's really hard for me to recommend a budget that isn't balanced in that next year. At least the year we're talking about, and then like the next year is what we go for. Since we budget conservatively, realistically, but on the conservative side, that means that as you go out into the out years, we know that we're probably going to bring in a little more than we think overall, and we know we're going to spend. We budget all of our staff. We're going to have a little bit of room. We're not going to spend all the budget that we have. So it's okay if we're showing a little bit of negative in those out years. But when you look at that blue column, the 1.2 million negative, that's that gap for next year. However, we're all hopefully going to be able to sleep at night because as I said, I don't think it's the right thing to do now to close that gap with budget cuts, which means service cuts. Because we do believe that the development that we're going to start to see next year will likely bring in $3 to $5 million in 2026, and that level kind of ongoing. And that's even according to the conservative Tiffany Hooten, our finance director.
I have to talk with her.
Although I think she's right. I think she's gonna keep me to saying like $4 million in public at this point. But so we think that in 2026, the city council, especially if some of our current revenue base starts to come back, the city council will have some revenue to talk about allocating for some of those kind of newer or better services, things that we want to do a little bit differently in the future, do more of. And that's what I have for you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, thank you for your time, Joe.
Feel cheated?
No,
All right.
I do not. So I feel excited that the city manager is excited about the budget.
Yeah. I am. So I don't know if you have any questions.
Kind of a question I have is like looking on this slide is like on that net cash flow, as you get further and further out, it shows like more and more of like a negative value. Is that just, like you said, just a conservative budget estimate, or is that? I guess I'm asking, is of that concern to you?
Yeah. If you look at that ending fund balance,
Yeah.
that is concerning to me. And then, as this is, structured now, I'm not comfortable with that. That's not gonna be, again, if we didn't have revenue fairly confidently coming on late next year into 2026, we would be starting a budget reduction, i.e. service reduction process now. So, we're always comfortable with a little bit of room, because if you are budgeting at all conservatively, that means that in those out years, if you were to force those to zero, you'd be looking at, effectively leaving a lot of money on the table unspent. And it is our job to spend the money that comes from the taxpayers. So yeah, it's both. You try to look at that, like if you look at that, that's about a, 5% gap, structural gap that we're showing now. And we'll have a better look at that, at what's gonna come in probably next year, and we'll be able to make some changes as we need to.
There's also a bit of it, if you look at this chart as sort of, if you imagine you're in a driver's seat of a car that's going down the road and you're steering straight and the road curves, what the out years show you is what would happen if you didn't turn the car. We of course know that we will turn the car, and the first bit of road that we're going down as we're turning the car, that's the first year of planning for the budget. Now, the projection would look different if we applied the same level of planning scrutiny to all of those subsequent years, but then we're spending city staff time building a plan that will change, we know, in the next year based on evolving scenario. That's why we put only the highest level of planning intentionality into the next year. We also use that as sort of a forecasting tool.
With most budgets, that net cash flow has a little more variability to it. And I don't wanna discount it too much, because it is a real important, indicator of the direction we're going. So it's a good question. Other questions?
Somebody question?
Yeah, I have a question more around the retention piece that you were talking about as an initiative. And of course, sorry, you have an HR guy in the room, so that's where my thought went right away. But thinking about that, you're talking about, professional development, leadership development, but also kind of holding cash flow steady there. So thinking about retention, what are certain initiatives you see outside of those two, professional and leadership development, that the city would take to ensure that retention? Because, we're seeing that outside, in other organizations too, left and right, hey, this company just did this permanent layoff. So how do you kind of imagine of taking that back?
So we know that money is only step one.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, you have a problem, but just because you have that, doesn't mean that you don't have a problem. So, we are always competing for talent. There are some folks who make their way, for money, but I don't think that's the whole thing. I think leadership is real important, and that's where I think, we can spend some more time if you're ever interested. If you haven't seen the DEI assessment, people share their truths, and you hear where they're coming from, and some of it's current, some of it's where the experiences that they've had. But I think professional development's real important. It's important that people can see that they have ongoing discussions with their managers about potential for their job and where they can go. We're in the process of overhauling our performance evaluation system so that it's not this once a year extensive process, but it's gonna look a lot more like, 3 or 4 times a year. I think 3 is the direction we're kind of headed, where folks will have to document discussions, check-in discussions, about not only progress on goals, but also progress, those goals needs to be for learning, development, and where people want to go. And I think if we can really sharpen up the leadership culture, and when I say that, it's not that we don't have good leaders, but we have a lot of new leaders who are all bringing their best skills from wherever they've come from. And that means that it's a lot of different approaches to things, and there's a lot of, we do things one way in one department and we do it differently in this department and differently in this department, whether it's onboarding or training so we've got to really develop some consistency across those systems. And so I think those are all the different strategies that I think will help us ultimately with retention.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're kind of defining about recreating the culture there too, which we know is something that keeps people around, so that's great.
I mean, my story is that 8 years ago, this city was dysfunctional with a dysfunctional council, and it wasn't a pleasant place to work. And the new generation of leaders on the council, that's not me, it's the younger people, really have changed the direction of the city.
It's part of the good stuff.
But I really think there's a generational change that has taken this city in a good direction. And Jim was brought in kind of as that generational change is happening, and we're trying to go from being a dysfunctional city with dysfunctional leadership to a functional city this is a pleasant place to work. This is not I don't think this is a hard city to work in terms of just the challenges that it brings. But it was a hard city because of the political leadership, quite frankly. And the city council now, I think, is really functional. In my mind, we passed a big test with the hiring of the judge a couple of weeks ago, where we just did it. And there was no nothing. And we didn't, we weren't 100% on the same page, but we were 90% on the same page, and nobody was going to throw down over those last 10%. It was really good.
Yeah. And it's so important that the council works that way. It's everyone comes to the job with things that they want to make, ways they want to make the city better. But I believe, and I worked for a number of councils, the more a new council member comes in and wants to lean into the group process and, advance what's important to them, but do a lot of listening and be committed to some of those higher purposes, those bigger picture things. That's a functional council. And people who can vote, have some differences among their votes, and move on is the best. And this council really, I think, values that. And so it's a good place to work. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, that was great.
Fun to meet all of you. And thanks for the work that you do. I don't get to say that myself, so I know you've got some other important topics on your agenda. With that, I will leave you to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Unless you do have anything else for me, particularly.
Nope. See you on Saturday. What
Yep.
time do we start?
We start at 8:30, but there's breakfast at
It's very early.
Get their date right. It is, I know. I chuckle because I know that about. All day.
You have Green Day at the end of it.
Thanks, Chris.
I gotta make Green Day.
Stopping by, Jim, we appreciate it.
Actually, I really want to see the Littleton.
You want to see what?
One of the warm-up bands.
Catching up, making work. All right, take care.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you.
So I know you want to talk about the Transportation Mobility Board.
Yeah.
I have the presentation. Do you want to look at that, or do you want to
Yeah,
just?
like you can put it up there.
Okay, let me see if I can do that.
I was gonna talk a little bit about the Safer Streets Littleton, like how we had kind of like talked about it in the past of like some of the things of like I went to the city council study session, the Transportation Mobility Board provided their input on like the Vision Zero policy and like they're really like the 6 kind of big takeaways that they like provided to the council from that. And I can read through them as Robert's looking for the presentation. The first one.
Robert, do you need a meeting invite?
I need an invite or an ID. If you send me the invite, that's great.
Let me know if you got it.
The first one was provide a better connected bike and pedestrian network within neighborhoods that interconnects with existing trails. Second was improve sidewalks for all citizens, especially for vulnerable users. Third was public communication programs that articulate the benefits. Fourth was prioritize school zone safety improvements. Fifth was affect behavioral and cultural change. The sixth was incorporate safer streets Littleton goals / strategies in all the city projects and programs. Which is like very interesting to like hear some of that and just like kind of, so you guys familiar with like the idea of what Vision Zero is? Okay, cause like, see how that kind of overlapped and intermeshed with the Safer Streets Littleton program, cause it definitely felt like there was a
Send me another invite, please, sorry.
Sure.
a lot of like meshing of the two ideas. Cause it's a little bit more than just like, no one dying from like traffic related accidents and stuff, but and I know one of the ones that they really honed in on was like affecting the behavior and cultural change, cause that is where the lasting impact will come, is like people actually drive the speed limit and are responsible and not speeding, cause it's like you can engineer and build things to prevent people from hurting others, but ideally people just do that out of their own nature or goodwill, so. That was kind of like the big things I felt like were just interesting to share, cause I know we had kind of talked about it a little bit at our last meeting.
Yeah. Well, and I know I saw that the mayor had posted something to the City of Littleton's Facebook page about his biking experience recently, and I think, things like that can tie in really well to safer streets if, we get kind of these spotlight figures,
Yeah.
talking about their own experiences too. It's not just, the parent who has a kid in the school or someone who only, relies on bike as their primary transportation or walking, but, do things like that, bring greater awareness that combine.
Sorry, guys.
You didn't hear anything.
So one of the things to think about as a committee is the Transportation Mobility Board got assigned the task 4 or 5 months ago of help us think through what we should do as a city with Vision Zero. And that was really what was the prompt for this meeting that they had with the city council. This is where they presented the results of that conversation. And in my mind, they presented we want 0 deaths to be our goal, but we want to also be focused on making this a more bikeable and walkable city. And so that's the kind of what they were trying to navigate. But, right now, you guys as a committee are assigned to tell us what the youths think, which is a really broad kind of mandate. And you could also think of a more narrow kind of topic that you think you should be focused on, that I can take back to the council and say, these guys want to work on this for 4 months, or 3 months, or 2 months, or whatever it is, and want to come back and talk to you about that, and we can do that. So just put that as not a lesson, but something to think about from this conversation. Here's the presentation. Of course, it's not in presentation mode, but there we go.
You're also the liaison to the.
Yeah, I'm the liaison to these 2 committees. You guys couldn't be 2 more diverse committees in terms of kind of everything. And that's not bad, but you're very different. So.
Or your favorite though, clearly.
Absolutely. So yeah, here's it is. These are the things that they talked about. Oops, sorry. So that's what Andrew said.
there any overlap or meshing? I know, like, we had talked in the past, you and Mackenzie have very strong feelings that like there needs to be like focus in particular areas of the city instead of the entire city at once. That you could see like kind of overlap or that you think would be worth elevating in this discussion?
I mean, I think the things I notice for sure, walking in Littleton is the narrow sidewalks or lack of sidewalks, and I know that's a major investment. And I, like, because it's such a big investment, I do think it's better to do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, kind of like I don't want to beat a dead horse, but like in the areas that are high traffic or where there all are vulnerable people, schools and whatever, or like, let's do it right there instead of kind of half-assing it everywhere. It's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that, and I think a big thing, like they had mentioned is like number 5, it's like the most effective way is making sure people are paying attention when they're driving and following the speed limits and being responsible, whether they're biking, walking, or driving. And enacting that cultural slash behavioral change is very hard, and I'd be very intrigued to see like what the city comes up with as a plan to approach that, whether that's through like higher enforcement or education through the schools or different public outreach things. But that's something for me that I think would be very interesting to see.
We heard from, Kenna, I believe, of the city staff, a couple meetings ago, who went into some of the detail about some efforts like that, I recall.
Yeah, no, I think we're doing all those 3 things. We're collaborating with the school district. I'm actually meeting with superintendent tomorrow to kind of try to do a curriculum for them around, really, I think it's gonna be around safe routes to schools. And we've collaborated with them on we've done the kind of assessments on how to improve school zone safety and what capital improvements we need to do there.
Educational programs.
Education and improvement. And then, we increased the police budget by 10 positions last year with the intent that would increase the amount of speed enforcement. And it hasn't gone as smoothly as I had hoped. And part of that is they're having trouble maintaining the workforce that they want. And so what they do is essentially the top priority is the neighborhood patrols, and the speed enforcement is the second priority. And so if they can't get people for the patrols, and the speed people get put on the neighborhood patrols. So I'm not 100% satisfied with that. And then I feel like we try to communicate about safer streets Littleton and the things that we do control, like the Littleton report. So I think there is a conversation about that. So I would say but the way to think about this presentation is, to inform the council as we make future decisions. And if the staff makes decisions that are in line with these recommendations, then they can use these recommendations to bolster their argument to the council that we should do these things. It's like, this is an advocacy piece for us to use as a council, or people trying to influence the council to try to get us to do certain things. And the interesting thing about Jim's budget presentation is, so much of this is really about capital infrastructure. Sidewalks is capital infrastructure, and nothing that Jim talked about was about sidewalks. Our capital budget is this 5-year plan is a completely different thing. And quite frankly, one of our biggest decisions is whether we start taking out loans, so we can do things faster. That's the biggest, in my mind, that's one of our biggest policy decisions we have to make, is are we gonna start borrowing money?
Is that common for cities to borrow money for capital projects?
Yeah, so if you think the school district where I was before, it's common for local government to borrow money, and the kind of the theory behind it is you make an investment that lasts over 20 years. If you borrow money that you pay off over 20 years, everybody who gets to enjoy those benefits also pays for them in their taxes over those 20 years, if that makes sense. So that's That's the moral, not the moral, but the kind of theoretical justification for borrowing money for capital improvement. And so like the school district, LPS, where I was at, every 10 years, LPS comes forward and asks for the ability to float a new bond. And my first 4 years, up until through my first 4 years on the, or first years on the school board, essentially what they would do is they'd float bonds that would not require a tax increase, which was about $80 million they'd raise every 10 years. And that was just enough money to kind of do maintenance. And so, but last time in 2020, we went for $300 million and they raised taxes. And so here, we're not going to raise taxes. Instead, we're going to use the 3A money and kind of obligate it. That was a long answer to a short question. Sorry, Jim is clearly rubbed up.
That was very impressive.
One highlight on what Councilman Reichert says yes, it is common and it's the alternative to trying to take the approach of saving up for many years and possibly never being able to. At the rate that costs go up and inflation goes up, and trying to eke out savings amidst while you're trying to keep operations going, keep the lights on, right? It's the alternative to that approach.
But it's the most conservative approach. And I think our community is relatively fiscally conservative, even if it's becoming less conservative in other ways.
As far as affecting behavioral change, outside of just the Vision Zero, is there things that the city's implemented, just totally different things that they actually feel like they saw a result on as far as like communicating with the community?
Well,
Where there was like, oh, like that seemed to really,
Like successful
Translate.
communication that effectively drove behavior change.
yeah, or like whether it's like how to do with schools or whatever, where it's just like hard for me to think of, something that would actually like get across to such a wide range of people where you'd actually see
I mean, I think
the results of it.
we have three tools. We have education, we have infrastructure, and we have enforcement.
Mhm.
And so we've kind of started on the education a little bit with LPS and the communication through Littleton City report. The infrastructure, what we've really done is kind of these temporary enhancements that we're putting out there. And then we're going to put up a bunch more, I think, signs around school zones. And then enforcement. And I think enforcement, I don't think we've actually been able to put in place. So in my mind, we've kind of gotten we've got three tools and we've kind of flexed each one of them kind of.
Mhm.
We're not doing any one of them kind of.
I know you had said that the Littleton Police Department was like struggling keeping I guess officers.
Yeah.
Is there like an action plan or something that the Chief Stevens is doing to figure out how to retain that staff?
Well, we pay really well, really well. You can be making over 100,000 in less than 5 years and you don't need a college degree. So I think we have we've got a great we're making a good, and this is not a hard town to be a cop in, right? This is not Sheridan or Inglewood or Denver. And so I think we make a good value proposition to people who want to be police officers. But being a police officer is a really challenging job right now.
Especially right now.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
With the shortage of staff, has there been any conversation about using like a photo enforcement zone? If they can't patrol for
Right.
speeding, has there been a conversation about alternatives?
Yes, so the conversation about photo enforcement has actually been driven by council member Pat Driscoll. And it's around the speeding on Bellevue. Because the police tell us there's no place to pull somebody over. And so it's not safe for us to actually do speeding enforcement on Bellevue. And so putting up speeding cameras on Bellevue makes sense. And I think Councilman Driscoll's made a really compelling argument that that's a dangerous part of the city that we need to enforce more in. And so we just adopted in kind of a perfunctory manner the updated state regulations on traffic, and it has a few more details on how to do that. The standard way that cities, this is what I've learned, do photo enforcement is you hire a contractor. And so it's figuring out, can we make a value proposition to a contractor that he or she, they're gonna make money off this to invest the cameras. And I think that's the next step, is to investigate that. But it has not been it's been focused more on Bellevue than kind of school zones. And we could do school zones, right? We could do crosswalks. I would love to do crosswalks, quite frankly. That would make me happy. So we are having that conversation, but it's not quite the same driving purpose.
Yeah.
I was like, as a part of that conversation, I'd be intrigued to see, I know I haven't seen it out west, but in a lot of parts of the south, they have that, but they have them with like temporary vehicles, like it's a specialized truck
Oh, yeah, yeah.
with that it'll move around to different parts of the city.
Yeah.
That would be like an investment that the city might be worth making, so that,
We've invested in signs that you move around and flash at you.
yes, yeah.
But we haven't invested in that. But that's like here you see it for the air quality thing. They move it around and it checks your.
They have one in like like driving into Cherry Creek on First. There's always one there.
Is there anything more you guys want? I mean, do you want to look at other slides, or how can I facilitate this up for you, Andrew, in any way?
I like having been there for part of the presentation live, then also having read through most of this, I don't have anything else I wanna cover, but anything y'all would wanna see or look at in the presentation from the Transportation Mobility Board?
Becky wants sidewalks.
Outside of.
Fair.
Is there anything that really stood out that was different than the other conversations we've had around this? Or is it kind of all going back to the same goals and intentions?
Yeah, no, I think this just added more complexity and thoughtfulness to the overall conversation we're having at the council level around pedestrian safety and kind of what people are thinking about it.
Yeah, it felt like a good blending of the two, cause like, while Vision Zero is great for cities, like, as far as I'm aware, with the exception of last year, there's not been a whole lot of like traffic related fatalities for pedestrians.
Yeah, I think there's injuries, but again, for us, the injury accidents are on the thoroughfares. They're on Santa Fe and Mineral and Broadway and Bellevue, and some of those streets are, some of ours, those are our citizens, but a lot of us, Douglas County, we don't care.
Not our problem.
Do you live in Douglas
But
County?
I think,
Well.
I think focusing on those high injury networks is important to reducing, things that we don't want to have happen. They don't enhance the walkable and bikeable nature of the city. And you got to do both. I think we want to do.
I honestly think like facilitating that naturally makes people drive slower, and like when you see people around, you're less inclined to speed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it just kind of happens.
Well, the chicken and egg
So,
thing, like which
yeah.
has to happen first?
And your comments just kind of made me think of, I know we're working on some like partnerships with Dr. Cog, at least on parts of Broadway. Are there other areas in the city that we're working on in like the main thoroughfares?
So, I think I said this like a couple months ago, like I realized that capital infrastructure decisions happen in three different ways. One way is if a government with more money, which is the state or the feds, offers us grants to match things, to build things. And so we're getting tons of matching grants to do the Mineral and Santa Fe intersection. And in some ways, that's somewhat driven by our ability to get those grants. And we just passed or approved the Broadway corridor plan, which was a joint effort between Littleton and Centennial and Inglewood and Douglas County. And it has some ideas around what Broadway should look like in the future. And the big one is more sidewalks and more easier, safer ways to bike on it. That's kind of the big impact for us. And what that does is it creates opportunities for our staff to go for grants. So if capital infrastructure first is driven by grants, or one way is driven by grants, And you have to have a plan to go for those grants. And you have to have matching money to go for those grants. And it's like 1 to 10 sometimes. It's not like you have to put down your mortgage, or it's kind of a mortgage, but it's not a huge amount if you think about the total, the payoff. And the 3A that we passed allows us to go for those grants. So one way to do is grants. The second way is really kind of staff driven, where you have all these experts that are saying, we need to do it. And Dennis has, he has said, he's giving me warning as an elected, like, you should keep your eye open. We need some capital investments in the library. Like, and then when we get those capital investments in the library, it'll be because of his, his recommendations. And that's what we want him to do, is recommend, how do you keep the library functional? And then the third ones are kind of things that are driven by the council, like fix my lake, right? Where it's, and so that's how so those are the kind of 3 different ways that things happen. And so we just approved the Broadway corridor plan, and that creates opportunities for us to get more grants. And this Littleton corridor plan that's up there, we're hoping will also create opportunities for more grants. But it's about historical preservation. It's about how do we think about economic development. It's a lot of different things.
Is the council focused on making Littleton more bikeable and walkable across the board, or is it more trying to make these certain areas more accessible to like get to the trails and get to like, do we necessarily want a ton of bikers going down Main Street and like, you know what I mean? Or I know we want it accessible, but I feel like we have all these cool trail systems and.
Yeah, and so that first one, it's connected. Connected is the word. And so to me, that's connecting making it bikeable and walkable to the places people want to go, like downtown or school, and then connecting to trails. And the Transportation Mobility Board, their dream, I think a dream that they've thought about on Main Street is to keep all the bicyclists off Littleton Boulevard and push them to Powers. I mean, Powers is the place where people bike. Powers is a pretty narrow road too. But it's more of the purposeful places to bike. Walking, it's how do you get to the Cherry Cricket and not get run over?
Yeah.
That's all I care about.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? Awesome, then we can move on to
I'm gonna disconnect.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. Move on to our third topic, our September 21st event. I'm sure you're aware of this, but Ellen is no longer able to facilitate that event on the 21st. And as a part of that, I was like, that kind of nixes that discussion. I'm gonna make sure everyone else on the board knows, so no email is aware that we're no longer gonna be doing that on the 21st. But we were kind of talking earlier, it's like, with that, do we want to try and plan a similar event further out? Or I'm more personally partial to the idea of doing something that is only reliant on us. That we can plan a little bit easier and might not require all the permitting and all the stuff of whether we want to host a social event or like a town hall at like the library. And then it's also kind of hard with only just the 3 of us to really like settle on a date, because
I think we're going into, by the time and I don't know how quickly we can plan it, but I think the second it gets into like the second week of November, it's not worth doing anything until probably like late February is when people check back into life. It's my 2 cents. I think it's a waste of effort to do it if it's gonna fall along the holiday season.
Thought that just occurred to me, like kind of getting into that is like, does the library have like a trunk or treat event in October? Something like that, I think we could facilitate, because that's like young people with an opportunity to bring their kids. We could make it like an all ages thing of like anyone can come, and then have more like, with that combined with maybe using a space in Bemis.
I'm not aware that we have one planned. I'm not aware that we've done one in the past. We have some ideas floated around and some that are starting to form around what events might fall around that timeline. As with anything, if we're trying to tack an effort onto an existing event, whatever that event is, you run the risk of sort of being the fly in the ointment, or coming across unintentionally as the fly in the ointment. I showed up for this concert, now I'm having to talk about this survey,
Yeah.
as an extreme example. You know, I don't know that would obviate anything entirely, but it's something to consider. It would certainly be, I mean, we would have a lot of availability in our meeting room if you wanted to host a standalone event. Or to co-time an engagement event of yours with something else that's going on, even if not in the same space, in the same vicinity. There might be some connections we can make on that front.
Okay. I was thinking of more of just like a standalone event for us if possible. Or I'm also open if y'all have input or ideas.
You think like a social, like meet and greet?
Yeah, that's why I think something where it's like if we could get maybe some funding from the city for like a little bit of food or something, it doesn't have to be allowed. Kind of get people out to interact with us.
I think it's supportive. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You know, it's less of a time commitment for members too, so if they're there, they can ask a question.
Yeah.
Something like that, that's a good idea. I think with the, September 1st, there's still an opportunity to, either have us there in the audience or, just around to support, but also we have a beautiful survey that we could start going to. So we start looking at 2 data points of we got September and then whenever we do our next.
We just need to make sure Robert and Andrew would be okay with that.
Yeah, but we can.
Okay, with what?
Some of us coming to your citizens meeting.
Well, you absolutely are welcome to that.
Well, we were thinking more as like, as an NGAB, you just kind of introduce who we are a little bit, not necessarily that we want to speak or be a part of the.
No, I'd be happy to introduce you. That wouldn't be a big deal.
I also think doing something that offers something to the community,
Yeah.
where like if we take this like fall period in the winter months to make like a 6-week thing where maybe we do like a master class at the library, and it could be like, what does it take to qualify for a loan if you want to buy a house in Littleton? And we could have a speaker come do that.
Yeah.
We could have like someone from, I don't know, like what to plant in your garden that doesn't take a lot of water, like just things that people might actually.
I think kind of in that vein, like just kind of like not necessarily coming of age, but like that era things. 'Cause I have a lot of friends who's like, especially like one friend recently got a new job and she's like, I have no idea what all these things about health insurance are with the deductible and co-pays and just some, I think, general education, like you said, master classes of getting people might be beneficial, especially for a lot of young families and young people trying to navigate what that looks like for them.
Yeah, and I think it's like have drinks and like small food and make it really casual and approachable and free, and you can post it on social media and whatever, and
Yeah.
it's like if no one shows up, it's kind of like no harm.
Sounds like you're talking about a library program.
Yeah, it's kind of like, put it out there. Cause we all have connections where we can get people to come speak for free on things that they're
Yes.
experts at.
Sweet.
Yeah, we can call it the adulting seminars. How to go.
Yeah.
I have my own advice from Dad.
Yeah.
Tim Waltz is 1 year older than me. I feel like he looks a lot older.
I agree.
Thank you. That was the right thing to say. Ken.
We're going to a Green Day concert, so you're pretty.
Huh?
Yeah, right.
On Green Day?
You're pretty young then.
Like what it takes to start a business, cause I think, there's all these, I don't know.
I can just write down some of these.
So it kind of sounds like you're describing like a micro seminar of speed dating.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Click here if you want to learn about this for the next 5 minutes and then.
But even if it's not on one night, like if we did like once a month over the course of like, yeah, 4 months, and we had 4 speakers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, like you said, that'd also be a great service to the community as well.
And then we're actually, providing a service in
Yeah.
our groups behind it, and it's not just this one and done thing.
Yeah, I really like that. I also really like the idea of being there, cause I was planning to be there either way on the 21st.
And Jackie didn't get her
Yeah.
flyer.
Yeah.
No, it's okay, you were working then. You did the right thing.
It's so does Word doc, but I mean,
Okay.
QR code's so easy to generate.
I think that would be beneficial. I could get some folks at the city like that I work, like Carla, to print out if we had QR codes or something, just to like to hand out. So I like that. Cause I'll be there on the 21st, and I think maybe, since it's only the 3 of us, maybe in October next month, we can sit down and try and figure out what are at least the first couple topics we wanna do, and when we wanna do these sort of like library program masterclass, whatever we wanna call it, or like you said, the adulting seminar, I like. But just like figure out what are the first couple topics we wanna do, what dates we can do them. And like we had kind of mentioned with that, like doing it just at the library, it's just getting the people there, getting the resources we need from the city to like buy drinks and snacks, and then like making it happen. It's a little bit less of a production of like trying to get permits and make sure police department and the fire department, everyone's okay with everything we're trying to do. So it's
Not only could this be a lot more, less burdensome approach, the concept that you're kind of gravitating toward, I'd like to, at the appropriate time, to connect you to some of the library staff, for whom this kind of thing is in their job description. So it's exactly the kind of thing that they do year round. So I'd like to explore a way that we can connect you to some of the staff and we can make it a partnership.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, so it sounds like October, we just try and give this more definition then.
yeah,
Yeah, and we can set dates and then
yeah,
kind of start booking.
and figure out-
Speakers.
yeah, I like that.
The only challenge that we might run into is a lot of our planning calendars and publication calendars will already have been set. So we'd have to do a bit of a two-step on the marketing side. But I don't know that that would necessarily mean that we couldn't do it. It just mean we wouldn't have the full array of communication and marketing tools available because some of those will have already gone out to print or to press, so to speak.
So we just have to check the calendar.
For 2025, they have.
Not out to 25, but if we're talking October of this year, then a lot of the Littleton report, a lot of our print calendars, a lot of our, mainly the print ones, really, or the more widely disseminated ones, they will have been, the content for those will have been set, but I'd certainly like library event calendar, social media, stuff that's more like in the moment or can be updated up to the day of the event, those will still be available.
I don't expect that we'll have anything planned for October, probably earliest late November, maybe December.
I kind of think we hold off
So
until.
like started the new year, yeah, I was like, I also want.
Yeah.
Kind of push
There's
it out.
actually gonna be people.
Yeah.
No one does anything.
I
Trust
get
me, I've tried to throw a lot of events over the holidays. Unless there's a lot of booze, they don't come.
that. That's fair. Okay, sweet. With that, you guys have anything else you want to discuss? I think that's kind of a good outline for that.
So Jim came and talked about the budget and, you know, we're gonna work on that for another couple of months. Is there any other kind of topics you'd want to learn more about within the city?
I mean, one that I was gonna kind of segue into that me and Chris have talked about, and the city's actually has a survey out for right now, is like housing. Actually the missing middle housing.
Yeah, so that's gonna be, the missing middle is gonna be our kind of next step in updating the uniform land use code. And so that's gonna be there's, I think there'll be a presentation on in the next couple of meetings.
Yeah.
For us, and so if you guys want to have that done here.
I know we've tried to reach out to Schmo and Habitat for Humanity and several different folks, so I think someone from the city, then also maybe get some other professionals or organizations in the area. I think that is an issue that I don't wanna say, I would say disproportionately affects the youth, cause that's a little weird of like the transition from I'm a renter now, I wanna buy a home or a condo or somewhere. And that jump is pretty hard right now for a lot of people, so having that middle housing makes it more of a ladder than a little 6-foot jump, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I think. Yeah. Great.
I was like, to harp on that, I was like, I know Chris had sent, there is actually a survey the city has out about.
Yeah. But that's gonna be one of the things we work on, and there's gonna be presentations prepared for that as it is, and we're gonna have policy discussions, and you guys can put in your 2 bits of, you know. Cause there's some the big disagreement right now, I think, with the council is how easy to make it for people to build duplexes. And or do we restrict it to some neighborhoods, or just anybody can build a duplex or a triplex? I think that's where we're gonna see the disagreement on the council. So your opinion on that will be valuable.
And do you know if wasn't there state legislation on ADUs being overridden, or like basically can be anywhere?
Yes, and in fact, we just got an email from the city attorney about that. So it's true. We really have very little ability to restrict ADUs, alternative dwelling units, which are mother-in-laws. And so we can't do parking restrictions. We can't do, there's, other than fire safety, we have very little leeway on restricting the ability to build ADUs. The one thing that was unclear is whether the ADU had to be smaller than the main unit, and it does. That doesn't feel like a huge restriction.
Yeah, you can't build a second house.
Well, if that wasn't there, then it was, essentially turning it into duplexes or more.
Right.
But, so, yeah, we've lost the ability to control it, but, the city loosened the ability to build ADUs 5 years ago, where you can build them in certain neighborhoods if you have access to an alley, and 1 got built, maybe 2. So it's not clear there's this huge rush to build ADUs in the city.
I think they're also coming out with, they're becoming a lot more affordable to do, and like Walmart's coming out with a like ADU, I think it's like 10 grand or something, and it's like a little 2-bedroom ADU that you really just need to hook up to water. So there's all these different
I did not know
things
that.
coming out.
It's like Sears used to sell houses.
Yeah, I live in a Sears kit home. It's like, I live in a Sears kit home. It's
That's
like the
fantastic.
same thing.
Like I've heard of that in more rural places, but not in a city like Littleton.
Well, and, yeah, I mean, those are the kind of things we have to talk through.
I think that those would be great conversations to have. Their input on.
Yeah.
Why don't, we can, Dennis and I can talk to make sure the missing middle presentation happens here too. Sure. I think it's coming up.
Absolutely.
And there'll be me and Gretchen going at it.
I would actually like to see that. That'd be entertaining.
And then she kicked him in the shin.
Oh, not, okay.
Good.
With that, we can move on to the comments and reports. Does the staff have anything?
No, not this week.
Do you have anything, Dennis, or you? Then our council liaison.
I feel like I've talked too much.
And then, I don't have anything besides, obviously, you guys know the 21st, we're not gonna have that. And then just again, to reiterate, there's a survey out that the city put out for that missing middle housing. If you guys, I will forward it to y'all, if you wanna take that. And then Jack is not here, so no vice chair, but do either of y'all have anything you wanna report or comment on? Awesome, and I will adjourn us at 8:15.
Interesting.